LBR LBO Brand Summit 2017.
So this session is about, multi-screen world. Okay. Say, 35 years ago, 40 years ago, we had no screens. Okay, only the cinema screen. And then came television, and which kind of, yesterday Amal was talking about how television kind of revolutionized a brand management space, brand development space. How the product categories was driven by television advertising in early 80s and up to 1990s. So we are seeing the next revolution of the screen. So that is multi-screen world. So what we're trying to do in this session is try to understand people's behavior, consumers' behavior in the multi-screen world, and to how we as brand managers, advertisers, advertising agencies, planners, media guys, whatever, okay, how we can enrich that customer experience through leveraging on the relationship the audience as its multi-screen. So let me hand over to Bharti now. Before that, Irene is from Cantor. She's the head of qualitative in Cantor APAC, and she had an interesting career both in research and in teaching, and also in FMCG. Farhan is operating out of Karachi. Oh, is it Singapore? Okay. Operating out of Singapore at Google, and he has a very interesting background because he comes from agency background. He has an agency background as well as a research background. Okay? Millward Brown and Stockholm. So it's a very interesting, profile. So we have research, Millward Brown, and Stockholm, and now with digital. When you say digital, okay, it's Hangama, probably the most known leading digital agency in South Asia. We had Carlton last year, so we are privileged to have Kamal. Okay. The next two gentlemen, I don't think I should. Three gentlemen, okay, they don't need any kind of introduction. Nevertheless, Sabri, perhaps one of the most youngest but longest career in media. Okay, luxury, FMCG, movie maker, lyrics writer, actor. Okay. And now the television part, but you come from a family of actors, artists, and now media boss. Bari, 46 years career in. Okay. JWT, Maharaja, JWT Indonesia, Malan. Am I right? And in between some consulting. Okay, so we got a great panel. So we got technology, research, digital, media, planning and buying, media investment management, and then we have a traditional media boss, okay, and then of course, a great advertising person chairing the session. So what are you, Bari?
Well, Lakshman said friendships cost money, so he wanted me to do this session, but he never told me that I got to do the session in the afternoon, which is absolutely challenging to get everybody's attention. But for the next few minutes, as we discuss this interesting topic of multi-screen and the revolution that it's having in the communication world, just imagine this to be your screen, as one of the screens, because you've got great content out here. People with immense experience are going to share interesting little bits of stories, and I've seen the decks. But before I hand it over to Irene, I just want to say three things that I experienced in the multi-screen world. One happened way back sometime in 2010. We were doing some research a few miles away from Gaul. We had taken actually the can reel, and we went out and spoke to villagers and asked them how they consume, and just to understand how they consume communication. But we had done the same test in Colombo with prominent marketers, and we went to the consumers and we spoke to them. The marketers had not seen these fantastic commercials, but as we started showing the commercials to this little village of Gaul, people started pulling out smartphones and started showing us the same commercials. They seemed to be ahead of all of us here in Colombo. So I was startled and I asked from where they had got the content. So they were getting refurbished phones, smartphones from the Middle East, and they were downloading content, and they had some of these commercials. That was my first experience of how people were seeing things on an alternate screen. The second thing is, I heard somebody speak about a week ago. The global life expectancy of humans is supposed to be 78 years. In Sri Lanka, it's 74 years. And he gave lots of statistics saying you'll be studying for 6 years, you'll be working for collectively 14 years. And what startled me most is that all of us will be spending 9 years of the 78 years staring at a screen. That's startling. And the last thing is that this is fact. Of the 176 million people online in the US, 158 million people engaged apps on a daily basis, contributing to 10 billion hours of online engagement with apps in December 2015. So this sets the tone of this session to tell you the tremendous changes that are taking place in this space. And I'm going to ask Irene to share her thoughts with us. Over to you, Irene.
Good afternoon. I know this is the graveyard session. We started the morning with tombstones, and now we are at the graveyard session. I also kind of overestimated my size and height, and that's the reason why I couldn't have been more wired in a digital conference. It's a very uncomfortable wire. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to be here, and I've enjoyed every bit of my first half, and I hope you enjoyed this session too. So to start off, this is my topic. So we are talking about connecting with Sri Lankans. I'm not going to talk about global numbers or APAC numbers. What I have is a lot of Sri Lanka numbers. So let's look at the multi-screen world in Sri Lanka today. Internet penetration is growing. I guess you all know about it. There's about 3.7 million people who access the net or access digital as a platform practically once every week in this country, which essentially goes to say, if I compare it with, say, Vietnam as a benchmark, which is there 50%, you're poised to grow, and your country seems to be geared towards investing in digital even more, which goes to say, while we have conservative predictions of 9% year-on-year addition, you might just surprise the entire market and have probably 75 to 80% penetration very soon. But this also tells us TV is still king in Sri Lanka. You cannot walk away from television. There was a question in the first session which was about, is TV dead? Is TV alive? I don't know if marketing is dead or alive, but TV is definitely alive, and it's going to stay that way for some time at least. But people are not just watching television, exactly as you mentioned. It is a multi-screen world. People are engaging with content on demand across different platforms, across different devices and different screens. Smartphone ownership is growing. And like a country, a comparison that we make is Myanmar in this region, where they completely skipped the PC revolution, probably have never seen a computer, went directly into the digital world using phones. That's exactly what's happening in Sri Lanka. Over lunch, we were discussing what could potentially be the barriers and why is it that more and more people are not embracing this technology through the rural parts of Sri Lanka. One thing is very clear. It could be cost, but I normally tend to discount that because that's, at the end of the day, when you really need something, you really want something, you put the money for it. It is about relevance. People are not seeing any great relevance in investing in this, but that's, with the kind of people that we are seeing today, I'm sure that's going to change. The digital footprint of Sri Lanka is going to change very soon. So this number is going to increase. The other interesting fact is a lot of people are currently using Messenger, are using social networking. So one observation that we had when we did our connected life research, so a lot of people we spoke to, they said, what was your first interface with digital? Facebook. What are they missing? Their first interface was actually Gmail, because they had to open a Gmail account. Yeah, so Facebook is really big in this country, and like, say, Cambodia, which has got about 89% Facebook users, that's where you're also headed. So how do you engage with consumers in a hyper-stimulated world? And the reason we call it hyper-stimulated is there's a lot of media meshing. There's a lot of the people sitting and watching television, but at the same time, they're on their handsets, they're checking something, there's an ad break, they're actually watching a video or a forward from a friend. So there is a lot of that that's happening here. And some brands are leveraging that in other parts of the world. So for example, there are brands who actually decide that at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is when my consumer in Indonesia will be seeing an ad for Indomie foods. At 1:01, I hit him immediately on YouTube with an interesting video that pops up. It is not the same ad, it's a follow-up. And that's where we talk about media which is actually synchronized, which speaks the same story, and leveraging content in that particular manner. So it is about optimizing the approach across different screens. It's not a copy-paste. It's not about taking the same ad, putting it somewhere else, but different ways of engaging it, and some brands are doing it superbly well. I don't know if you're familiar with the Coca-Cola Choc activation. It really did very well, created a lot of energy and buzz across Hong Kong and other markets. So that is exactly what we're talking about. Another question that we faced in the first half today was about return on investment. I also heard a lot of banking, so I know there are a lot of money men here. So for the money men, this slide. When I said TV is king, and it has probably 100% reach, the fact does remain that when you use social network, and I would like you to focus only on the first bar chart, if I use social networks, I get about 41% reach. If I go ahead next step and I link it up to news, sports, weather, any kind of content online, I get an incremental 8%. If I go ahead and I post in an online video, I get about 4%. In all, I'm getting 53% reach. But it is not always a number game, and I know it because I'm a qualitative researcher, and we don't really delve so much into numbers. But the fact remains that while TV is great in terms of creating awareness, a lot of the other screens help you engage better with consumers. And it's not about brand monologues, which is what television is very popular and very good at doing. It's more about having brand conversations. Once you've reached them, you also realize that there's a battle for attention span. We're a generation that's suffering from ADD. And if you compare it, benchmark it as a good researcher against a goldfish, we're even worse than a goldfish. That's where other screens really help us, because you have undivided attention. You're getting consumers to actually interact and engage with the kind of content that you are putting up there. So the right media mix can actually help you literally magnify and therefore create a lot more resonance with your target audience. I have an example of a brand that has done that. I'll just play one short video. What I'm going to play is the television ad. But what is interesting is what they did with this.
You have my heart, we'll never be worlds apart. And that's when you need me there, together we'll always share. Because when the sun shines, we shine together. Know that I'll be here forever. Said I'll always be your friend, and you know that I'll stick it out till the end. Now it's raining more than ever. Know that we'll still have each other. You can stand under my umbrella. Hello, hello, hey, hey.
I'm sure you got the theme very clearly. So it's about being true to your pleasure. That was the film on television. Then they went ahead and they picked up what we were talking about in the previous session, which is brand activism. Are they an activistic brand? Not really. They're not there fighting the cause of LGBT, but what they are definitely doing is creating awareness around it and building conversation. So the next one to the right that you see is actually a lesbian wedding. This was for gender equality in Australia. So it was not about just taking the central theme and finding different versions or just going on air and putting it on different media. It was also about landing it in a culturally appropriate manner with absolute authenticity and relevance. So in Australia, they knew that this is what we've got to talk about. It's actually a short film. Do watch it on YouTube. It's very interesting. It's very beautifully done. And then they went ahead and they made a game out of it. So they gamified the content where there's actually a girl who's running across your mobile screen catching bonbons. So it brought in the thrill of gaming. It gave you the thrill of winning and embedded the brand into what you were doing. And it is nothing but a simple Pac-Man game. The girl runs around, jumps things, goes and grabs bonbons, and you are the one who's doing it, right? So that's how content has been taken. One example, there are so many more, of how they've taken this and activated it across different screens and different platforms. But at the heart of the matter is great content. And I think it's the next session where we'll be delving really deep into it. This is so, so important. And the last 2 years, not 2, actually 5 years, we have just been meeting clients, talking to people and saying, you know what, you really need to understand people and the stories behind their lives and identify the right insight. There was a conversation again in the morning around what is a good insight. It is absolutely what the gentleman then explained. It is in you, you look at it and you say, aha, I knew it, why didn't it strike me? And those actually come in when you start talking to people and you start getting unearthing stories. So we need to leverage these different screens to engage in a very, very meaningful manner. Here's an example. I don't know why I keep doing Unilever examples, but this is an example in China, a market which we keep hearing about because they're so digitally savvy. We do most of our, in fact, 99% of our researchers in China have transitioned online. We rarely do any traditional work now. But this actually started with a client saying, this was 2 years back, saying, I need digital. I have a digital agency. We'll create a digital ad. So let's do some digital work and go ahead and do it. So this is what we created. Came in from consumer stories. It was basically for a brand called Comfort, which is a fabric softener. It's a fabric conditioner. What they were facing was, nobody is interested in using fabric conditioner. There's no relevance. So let's target millennials. Those are the new breed that we can talk to and create new stories with. We went in with an idea. The platform, the co-creation platform that we use actually changed the whole idea, and they came up with simple stories. This is one of them. You didn't need to understand Mandarin to understand that story because there's a universality to it. It's a moment of losing face or embarrassment because your clothes have actually let you down. So those were the stories that they came up with. And this then finally became the digital ad, which is what the client wanted. But what he realized was the amount of buzz that it created on digital, they decided, why not take the same content and put it on television? And it worked. And that was a big surprise for them. In addition to that, they took the same concept and created something called a celebrity rise and fall, which was similar kind of stories around clothes, just using celebrities. And I'm sure you're familiar with this. A lot of the E-News, film, magazines show two people with the same dress. Katy Perry wore this and Taylor Swift wore this. Oh, Katy Perry wore it better. That's exactly what they did. They just embedded the category into it by saying her clothes looked better, they felt soft, they fell well. So those were the kind of things that they did. And from what my client says, it's got about 4 times higher level of engagement than the most popular things which were there on Weibo. So my concluding thoughts, TV is still king in Sri Lanka and would continue to be for some time. But if you really want to have meaningful conversations with your consumer, with your target audiences, you would need to transition to digital and use screens. And here in your case, it is a smartphone, it is the phone. use it effectively to actually build that. And most importantly, it needs to be synergistic. There has to be a certain synergy between what you're doing on television and how you take that idea forward into other media. Thank you.